Waiting. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the April 11th, 2023 meeting of the Board of Adjustment to order. Let's begin with a roll call. Please indicate your presence after I call your name. Kathleen Patterson. Here. Melina Blaze. Here. Adam Bowe.
Here.
Brandy Molstad. And I am John Turner, Chair. First, I'd ask you to silence your cell phones. We've got two cases tonight. Each case will be called in order as it appears on the agenda. To have an efficient and fair hearing, I will call the case. The zoning administrator or representative will give their brief report. Then the applicant, I'll call on the applicant to present their case. The chairman will call in any members of the public who are present and opposed. The staff may address arguments then of the applicant and rebuttal evidence. The applicant gets a chance to rebut those arguments, and at that point, the board will further discuss any issues, and once discussion is concluded, if there's a motion, the board may vote to take action. There's some speaker request forms. If anybody wanted to speak tonight, they other than the applicants and the city, you need to fill out a request form and give it to the clerk. There'll be, I limit the time of that to 3 minutes unless you're speaking on behalf of one of the two agenda items. We have a consent agenda, disposition of absence of Brandy Molstad from January 10th meeting and the approval of the minutes from the January 10th meeting. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda? Second?
Second.
All those in favor? And the motion carries unanimous. So the first item on the agenda then is 3R Legends Senior Living Variance V2303. This is a request to consider two variances from the 95th Avenue and Beardsley Road Planned Area Development Residential Development Standards for the Legends Senior Living Group located at 20424 North 98th Lane. The applicant's requesting a reduction of the required side yard setback from 15 feet to 10 feet 3 inches and a reduction of the required side yard setback from 8 feet to 3 feet 10 inches. At this time, will the staff please present your report?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair, members of the board. My name is Chris Jasper. I'm a senior planner here with the City of Peoria, and I'll be conducting this presentation. So we are looking at case number V2303, Legends Senior Living. The variance request, as the Chair mentioned, is for a reduction in the rear and side yard setbacks of a single-family residentially zoned property in the 95th and Beardsley PAD. The request would allow the applicant to obtain building permits for what have been unpermitted additions to the principal structure or the structure in question. It's located at 2424 North 98th Lane, just north of Beardsley Road off of Tonopah Drive. And the applicant for this case is Daniel Estrada of Contexture LLC. The subject site is approximately 5,600 square feet in size, located within the 95th Avenue and Beardsley PAD zoning district. It is currently, or has been used as a group home since 2005. This is a permitted use within the zoning district, and therefore the use is not in question as part of this variance request. A little bit of history on this one. It was constructed in 1998 as a single-family residential home. It was converted into a group home in 2005. In 2009, a previous property owner converted a two-car garage into bedrooms and a bathroom to expand the livable space. And since that time, no other permits have been submitted to the city for any additional work. In August of 2022, the property was purchased by the now current property owners, and a group home registration application was submitted to the city to capture that change in ownership in September of 2022. Inspectors visited the site the next day and informed the property owner that there appeared to be unpermitted work at the rear of the property and that they would need to submit building permits in order to get those into compliance and permitted with the city. About 2 weeks later, the applicant submitted those building permits for the work, at which time staff identified that the additions were non-compliant with both setback and lot coverage requirements. The applicant then requested and the staff held, a preliminary application meeting between staff and the applicant, at which time staff noted that the submitted materials did not appear to justify a variance request, as that was the sort of intent and purpose of that pre-app meeting, the exhibit for which is included in your staff report. The applicant did pursue a variance request, and that was processed through case V2202, which you may recall from our January 10th meeting of this year, at which time it was denied by the Board of Adjustment. Since that time, the applicant has revised submitted a revised request for a variance. They've modified their proposal after they've removed what was an unpermitted attached rear patio. And so they've reduced the total number of requests down from 3 to the 2 you have before you today. So real quick overview. The development standards include setbacks, lot coverage, height, all of which are enforced or established by the zoning district in question. In this case, it's the 95th Avenue and Beardsley Road PAD, which has a front setback of 20 feet, a rear setback of 15 feet, and side setbacks that must be a minimum of 5 and 8 feet respectively. This is important because any additions to a principal structure that are attached to that structure must meet those setback requirements that are established by the zoning district. The applicant is requesting to reduce those setbacks, namely the rear yard setback from the 15 feet mentioned before to 10 feet 3 inches to accommodate an addition that was made to the rear of the property, and to reduce the larger side yard setback, so there's 5 and 8. They want to reduce the 8-foot side yard setback from 8 feet to 3 feet 10 inches. And that is reflected graphically on the PowerPoint presentation. So as I noted before, the big change from the previous variance case that you heard in January is that there was a rear yard patio, kind of where that keynote 108 is, that was encroaching further into the rear yard setback. The removal of this rear yard patio did bring the structure into compliance with the lot coverage maximum, and it did reduce the encroachment into the rear yard setback, and therefore has resulted in this modified variance request. So it was about 4 feet 10 inches to its current proposal of a reduction to 10 feet 3 inches. The side yard setback request has also been increased in that the applicant is seeking a reduction from what was in the previous case about 4 feet to 3 feet and 10 inches. So those are the primary changes from that earlier case. Variance cases are evaluated on 5 criteria, all of which are listed on this slide. I won't bore you by reading them all in order, as we'll kind of get to them in the proceeding slides, but all of these criteria must be met in order for staff to recommend approval of a variance. The applicant submitted a justification that included a response to each of those criteria. Staff has responded to each of those justifications both in the staff report, and I'll briefly summarize them here. So the number one is that the applicant must demonstrate that a special circumstance or condition exists on the property. Staff believes that no unique identifiable factor related to the lot necessitates this variance request. And although the presence of unpermitted additions, the presence of unpermitted additions is unrelated to the physical characteristics or layout of the lot. Although a previous property owner may have conducted the improvements or the additions, a failure to disclose that work is a civil matter and is not a valid justification for the issuance of a variance. Getting into the second criteria, which states that a literal interpretation of the ordinance deprives the appellant of rights enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district. The applicant noted that they are not able to receive a certificate of occupancy, which prevents them from opening a group home. Staff notes that the applicant and neighbors are both subject to the same development standards established by that zoning district. The applicant does have the ability to obtain that certificate of occupancy by complying with those development standards and removing the unpermitted work. In staff's opinion, issuing a certificate of occupancy with nonconformities existing known to the city would impart a right that is not commonly enjoyed by others in the same zoning district. The third criteria states that the alleged hardship caused by a literal interpretation of the ordinance has to be more than a personal inconvenience or a financial hardship and is not the result of actions by the appellant. They note that the changes were made by a previous owner of the property, and staff believes that this justification is a personal inconvenience. Although the applicant did not conduct the permitted work, they can still modify the structure to bring it into compliance with the zoning standards, which is a financial hardship, it's a personal inconvenience, and those are specifically excluded for consideration for a variance request. Number four, the applicant must demonstrate that granting the variance doesn't confer any special privilege denied to other property owners, parcel structures, or building in the same zoning district. They're stating that they're not seeking to build anything that exceeds what other property owners in the same zoning district would be allowed, and that they want to permit construction that is not in compliance. Staff believes that the requested variance would confer special privileges because it allows the applicant to circumvent development standards that are established by the zoning district. And finally, number five, the applicant must demonstrate that granting the variance will not interfere with or injure any adjoining properties in the same zoning district. The applicant states that the improvements are already present and they have not heard any complaints. Development standards such as setback requirements are intended to ensure a uniform protection against the intrusion of light, noise, and any other type of nuisances, so that there's a buffer zone essentially between single-family residential units. We also wanted to note that neighbors did request opposition to a previous version of this variance request. We did not receive any opposition to this particular form, but neighbors have noted that they objected to the variance request in a different configuration. Thus, staff believes that allowing this encroachment would interfere with or substantially or permanently injure adjacent properties in the same zoning district, and therefore the criteria are not met. A quick run through of the notification requirements. In accordance with our zoning ordinance administrative requirements, a notice of hearing postcard was mailed to all property owners within a 300-foot radius of the subject property and all registered HOAs within a 1-mile radius of the property. A legal ad was published in a newspaper of record, and the site was posted with signage in accordance with our requirements. No letters of opposition or support were received for this variance request. However, as noted previously, the previous case that we heard in January did have 2 letters of opposition and a speaker in opposition. The concerns at that time related to potential impacts to street parking, the nearby elementary school, Park Ridge Elementary, the encroachment onto neighboring properties, and impacts to property values. Staff believes that the request and the justification provided for this variance do not meet the review criteria identified within the zoning ordinance, and that has been articulated within the staff report. And the proposed layout has the potential to disrupt or possibly interfere with the adjacent neighbor's ability to enjoy their property, and as such, staff recommends denial of the variance case V2303. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available should you have any questions.
Does the board have any questions for staff?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have 2 questions. One, just verifying that nothing has changed from the January 10th meeting to now in terms of the variance criteria.
That is correct, Chair, members of the board. The variance criteria are the exact same.
Okay, and then second question, the applicant provides justification for each criteria, and I'm reading these and they look very similar to the previous variance request, I think 2202. Did you have any noticeable or notable changes between that request and this one in terms of that justification?
Chair, members of the board, no, there were no meaningful changes in the justification.
Thank you, that's all.
Is the applicant present? Would you like to present your justification for the request?
Good evening, board members. My name is Daniel Istrate, 3334 North 20th Street, Phoenix, Arizona, 85016. I'm the applicant and the architect with Contexture LLC. As mentioned in the findings, I got involved with the project after it was already completed and built. When we were approached to do the plans, we completed the plans submitted into the city. At that time is when we found out that it was not in compliance, both on the lot coverage and on 2 of the setbacks, a side setback and a rear setback. We've made the first submittal that we came in back in January, requesting one was on the lot coverage. We're able to, by the removal of the patio, to not having to need a variance on the lot coverage, and then also that reduces the setback, the rear setback requirements from 15 to 10.3, which that will be a 4'9" encroachment, and then on the side will be a 4'2" encroachment. As mentioned before, I've been through a few variance processes. I'm familiar with how they work as far as having to grant special circumstances, which is basically an exception to the rule, and primarily are reserved for a more difficult lot, a more terrain that's just hard to work with. But at the same time, I do believe that the fact that we have a variance, certain circumstances should be looked. And I guess number one would be for the fact that the use of it too as an assisted living facility, to be able to grant the residents the same rights as some of the other residents or somebody else that might be able to live there. And although not a main criteria on the fact that it's already built, I just, as an architect and as a LEED certified architect, which is concerned with use of resources, I do find it a little bit that we should consider the fact that something that's been built, that's built meeting the building codes as far as construction-wise, for an encroachment of 3 foot 8 and 4 foot 2 to demolish concrete and structures and roof that were built. It's, again, I don't condone people building without a permit. Obviously, I'm an architect. I want people to call me and build with permits in the right way, but also tearing down a portion of the addition that it doesn't present any life safety or health safety to anybody else. As far as the setback and encroaching on it, the setback requirements between homes are 5 feet and 8, which means if you're at 5 feet on one side, your neighbor could directly to adjacent to you could also have that same 5-foot setback. So in theory, the distance between two homes, the least it could be is 10 feet. You're 5 feet, the neighbor's 5 feet. So even if on the side, reducing it to from 8 to 3 foot 10, having the neighbor also having a 5 allows for a little bit of distance. And then the fact that in the rear of the property, had the property been back to another property where, somebody's backyard, somebody's pool, or, playground for their kids, the back of the property backs up to 99th Avenue. So directly behind them, there isn't another house that would be adversely affected by having the property move over 3 foot 9 inches or 8 inches to accommodate for the closet and the bathroom for the one bedroom that was modified. Again, like as mentioned, the property was already built when I got involved, and whenever I do get contacted by any potential client, which is not relevant to this, I always do suggest for them to submit plans beforehand. Clearly, it's not always the case. At the last meeting, the owner wasn't present. He submitted a paper, and he's here just in case if the board has any questions for the owner that purchased the property. It's not the previous owner, but the owner that purchased the property filled the paper, one of the cards. If you guys have any questions for him as the owner, as far as operations, he'll be more suitable to answer that. But if you have any questions for me as far as the architectural plans, I'm open to take any questions.
Does the board have any questions for this speaker? Does the staff have a rebuttal?
There is one bit of clarification to statements made, and right now, the building plans are on hold, subject to the variance request being approved. Should that variance request be approved, building plans and a permit would need to be obtained in order to go forward. Inspections would need to occur. There may be additional work needed on those additions. We're not quite sure, but at this point in time, the statement about they would be built to standards would not be, we could not verify that as accurate information.
Does the applicant want to respond to that?
Well, as the registered architect, I did concluded site visits to look at the construction and the drawings that were. So the way it works, even if the work is already been done, the drawings, whether that's for the roof or the footings or the walls, the drawings are created per code. When an inspector does the inspection on the site, they will verify that what's been built meets the code and the drawings. So if the drawings get approved, it will be approved with all the details and building code requirements, which then they'll be verified on site to make sure. From my observation, again, as a licensed architect, the work does comply or appears to comply with required building codes.
Is there anyone from the public who wants to speak on this? I have a speaker request form from Ronald Sykes.
So Ronald is the owner. He said he's available to speak if you guys have any questions or if he wants to plead his case. I'm leaving that up to him and up to the board.
Did you want to speak, Mr. Sykes? Sure.
Good evening. First, I'd like to address the issue of hardship. I understand, obviously, that it could be a civil matter, but civil matter shouldn't be taken lightly either. A civil matter between two litigants is a hardship. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, and it really is an inefficient use of resources when a body like this could probably solve the problem much more efficiently. I purchased the property in August of '22. Obviously, there was no understanding that there were no permits for the property, for the additions that were made. But I purchased it as an ongoing assisted living facility, and the elderly do need places to live. And unfortunately, and surprisingly, a lot of communities just are not amenable to assisted living facilities being in their neighborhood. So when you do find one, I think it's incumbent upon everybody to make a special effort to accommodate such a facility, because honestly, the elderly have very few resources and options on where to live in a communal environment. Sure, they can be in a nursing home or a very commercial assisted living facility, but most don't enjoy that because it's not communal, it's not familial. So I think we should at least give some consideration to that as a hardship. If we were to deny the variance, you are impacting a hardship, or you're imputing a hardship onto a special needs group, the elderly. Secondly, I would like to hear what the projected impacts of the variance would be on neighbors. I know this gentleman said there might be projected impacts, but probably we need to hear specific impacts on the adjacent property, because in my opinion, it seems to be minimal, the impacts. Basically, I think that's it. I think we really should consider what true hardships are, not just personal, financial, they're societal as well. And so when you make your decision, I hope you would consider the societal impacts of your decision regarding the variance. And I'd also be willing to answer any questions you may have.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Sykes? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes.
Thank you.
Just to clarify real quick, you did or did not, you were or were not aware of the building permits during the time of purchase?
No, because it was not disclosed. My understanding that all of the additions were made under code and with all the regulations, in compliance with all regulations. I had no idea that there was not a building permit for the most recent addition.
Okay. And even if the variance is denied, you still have the ability to run as a senior living facility, correct? It's just with less occupancy?
Well, there's more impact than that. If the variance is not granted, then there will be significant disruption in the operation, because you've got to cut walls and move concrete.
Okay.
So you may have the ability theoretically, but actually in practice you won't, because there would be too much disruption. The people would have to be dislocated, relocated to a different place. Because honestly, most of them have some form of mental dementia, and loud noise and construction is not conducive to their well-being, so you would have to move them all out.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sykes.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion? In that case, I'll make a motion that the application be denied. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, the basis of my earlier questions were just to verify that, between January and now, trying to understand what may have changed, what new information came about. And my viewpoint is that the criteria didn't change. There was really no new information that came about that would cause me to think that the previous decision that was made is invalid. And so I think if I vote differently than I did previously, that's not a reasonable approach. So I will support the motion.
Okay, let's vote. The motion is to deny the application. The motion carries. So the application is denied. The next matter on the agenda is for our Reamer Residential Project variance V23-01. This is a request to consider a variance from the Suburban Ranch SR 43 zoning district development standards for a single-family residential development located west of the northwest corner of 105th Lane and Camino de Oro. The applicant is requesting the following: a reduction of the required front yard setback from 40 feet to 25 feet. Staff, please present your report.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Again, Chris Jasper, Senior Planner here with the City of Peoria, and I'll be presenting this case. So we're looking at a proposed reduction of the front yard setback of a single-family residentially zoned property in our SR 43 district. The request would allow the applicant to construct a custom single-family home and a sport court. The property is currently vacant. It is located west of the northwest corner of 105th Lane and Camino de Oro. The applicant is Chad Henry Dixon of Tangent Point Architecture on behalf of property owners Gene and Kathy Reimer. The subject site is just over 1 acre in area, so about 45, almost 46,000 square feet. It is zoned Suburban Ranch. It's our SR 43 zoning district. It is currently vacant and undeveloped. It is located next to a Salt River Project or SRP power line corridor that runs mostly north to south with a westerly or bent. It is also located on the north side of a 20-foot ingress, egress, and public utility easement that is located within, or kind of on the north side of the Camino de Oro street frontage. It's surrounded by custom homes to the east and the Sierra Ridge Estates subdivision, single-family residential properties to the south. A little bit of history about the subject property. It was annexed into the city in City of Peoria in 2014, at which time it was initially rezoned to its current disposition, SR 43. In March of 2022, it was purchased by Gene and Kathy Reimer. Subsequent to that, they scheduled a preliminary application meeting with the city to discuss their proposed development plan. At the time, staff noted that there were proposed encroachments into the front and western side setbacks, and we'll discuss a little, oh, actually we'll talk about it now, sorry. We do have some latitude within our zoning ordinance to consider a reduction in side yard setbacks when single-family residential uses are located next to specific physical conditions or uses, and that's within section 21422 of our zoning ordinance. So things like golf courses, unused open spaces, utilities, things of that nature. Our planning manager has the ability to adjust side and rear yard setbacks for accessory structures specifically, and that likely applies to that western boundary. So the side yard encroachment was not noted as needing a variance at that time. As discussed previously, the setbacks are established by the zoning district. In this case, we're looking at the Suburban Ranch SR 43 zoning district. The front setback is 40 feet and side setbacks are 20 feet, which are the most relevant setbacks for this particular proposal. So I've highlighted in yellow the proposed single-family residential property, the home, the custom home, and in green, proposed sport court located more or less in the side yard. In blue is the existing access easement on the north side of the Camino de Oro street frontage, and in red is the property line. And the difference between the access easement and property line is salient because, according to our zoning ordinance, we measure front setbacks from the edge of the access easement as opposed to the property line, which is kind of what resulted in this particular condition. So the applicant is seeking to reduce that front yard setback as measured from the access easement edge from 40 feet to 25 feet. And I've shown what that might look like on the graphic on the PowerPoint slide. So it would be about a 15-foot reduction of that front yard setback. And this would allow the applicant to remain compliant with respect to their proposed development plan. So as before, we're looking at the same evaluative criteria contained within our zoning ordinance when looking at a proposed or a variance request. The applicant identified that the lot shape is irregular, it's truncated with an extremely wide and a wide front and a narrow back. They noted its location to SRP's power lines to the west and the cul-de-sac adjacent to a PAD on the sort of southern property frontage. They indicated that this was not found in other lots in the area. Staff noted that there are no unique identifiable factors related to the subject lot that necessitate this request. The SRP corridor is worthy of consideration, certainly. However, there are administrative measures that have been communicated to the applicant to kind of alleviate any conditions or encroachments into that side yard setback on the western side. Neither the presence of the PAD or the cul-de-sac materially impact the configuration of the subject lot, and as such, staff believes that no special condition exists that on this property that are not present on other properties in the same zoning district. The applicant stated that because the access is from the cul-de-sac, they are forced to move their development, the proposed single-family residential structure and associated accessory units, further back into the narrower portions of the lot while the front portion goes unused. And they claim that this is unlike other SR 43 properties nearby. Staff maintains and believes that the applicant and the neighbors are subject to the same development standards, the SR 43 zoning district standards. All SR 43 zoned properties in the area, including adjacent properties, measure their setbacks from that access easement as opposed to the property line, and that the site is sufficiently large to accommodate both the custom home and any accessory buildings as proposed, or excuse me, with modifications to the proposal. The applicant says that the buildable area starts 60 feet from the property line due to a 20-foot easement the 20-foot easement that is located 20 feet from that southern property line, and then they have to measure 40 feet from that access easement to the front face of their building, which pushes the development back into that truncated area of the lot that equates to less area for any development by the owner. Staff believes that this does not represent a hardship that is more than a personal inconvenience or a financial hardship because it is typical for large lot residential properties to be located in areas that don't have dedicated right-of-way, where access easements represent the point from which setbacks are measured. And that is pretty typical throughout the city for SR 43 and custom home properties. So the applicant is seeking to avoid modifications to its development plan that represents, in staff's mind, a personal inconvenience which is excluded from consideration for a variance. The applicant is also claiming that the granting of the variance is based on, again, the truncated portion or shape of the lot, again noting that the 20-foot access easement and then 40-foot setback equates to a large area of property that is not buildable, and they claim that there are no other truncated lots in the same zoning district nearby. Staff notes that although the site is irregularly shaped, there are administrative solutions noted before that can solve some of the side yard setback regulations to accommodate the development proposal or the configuration that they're presenting to staff. The requested variance would confer special privileges that are denied to the neighboring property owners because it would allow, again, the property owner to circumvent development standards established by the zoning district. And finally, the applicant states that in response to the criteria regarding injuries to adjacent properties, that because it's located at the end of a cul-de-sac and there are no other houses or lots on the cul-de-sac, that granting the variance will not interfere with or injure the rights of other properties. And staff, took a look at the proposed layout and noted that the proposed variance would locate the building closer to that Camino de Oro street frontage, and that combination of the reduced frontage in addition to the proposed location of the garage does not appear that it would comply with our engineering requirements for site visibility into and from the subject lot, which may create conflicts, and with larger vehicles such as RVs or tractor trailers result in a clipping of the neighboring perimeter wall. And I've got an exhibit here on the PowerPoint that kind of demonstrates what we're looking at. So as a vehicle would be traveling westbound on Camino de Oro, turning into subject property's easternmost driveway that goes into the back of the rear yard of the development. It is a difficult turning movement with very limited site visibility, which may result in clipping of that kind of corner piece on the eastern property. In addition, there are concerns that any vehicle attempting to back out or drive out of that driveway would have limited site visibility of any vehicles traveling westbound on Camino de Oro to execute like a turnaround in the cul-de-sac area. And as such, staff believes that granting the variance likely could lead to injury unless otherwise modified. And one potential solution is to meet the development standards and remove or relocate that driveway further east with kind of a flare out. That would be assisted by moving the building north. As with the previous variance case, the city was required to provide notice in the form of postcards to all property owners within 300 feet of the subject property and all registered HOAs within a 1-mile radius. A legal ad was published in a newspaper of record, the Peoria Times, and the site was posted with signage in accordance with our regulations. No letters of opposition or support have been received by staff. Staff's findings and recommendations are as follows. Staff believes that the request and the justification provided do not meet the variance review criteria as identified in the zoning ordinance and as demonstrated in the staff report. In addition, granting the variance would impart a special privilege that is denied to other land parcels, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district. Staff's recommendation is to deny the applicant's request for a variance under case V2301. This concludes my staff report, and I'm available should you have any questions. Thank you.
Does the board have questions for the staff?
I have one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I see that the property line extends, looks like estimated like 10 feet into the street. Is that the same for the adjacent properties?
Chair, members of the board, I'm just pulling up the site plan so that we've got context here. Yes, that is correct. Camino de Oro at this location is not dedicated right-of-way. The access easement continues, I believe, all the way from the intersection of 105th and Camino de Oro.
Thank you.
So my question is, if you look at this map, it looks like when you look at the location of the neighbor's residence, there's a setback of 27 feet. So are they also supposed to be 40 feet, or is that just, I don't know if that's the front of their house or what that's showing?
Yeah, Chair, members of the board, I think I can get a map that's showing what's happening here. This is probably the best we have. So the neighboring property to the east actually fronts to an access easement coming off of Camino de Oro northbound. So measured from Camino de Oro, from that access easement, would be the side yard setback, which is 20 feet, and they are compliant.
Any other questions? Thank you. Is the applicant present? Would you like to present your justification?
My name is Chad Dixon with Tangent Point Architecture. The office is located at 15331 West Bell Road, Surprise, Arizona. We were asking for this variance because this property is off by itself. As you know, this SRP is right next door to is next to us with the power lines and so forth. By moving the property up where we're asking for, we're kind of keeping the context of this little community here, like the building next to us, the side setback of that road's at 27 feet. The community across to the south of us, their setbacks range from 20 to 25 feet from their property line. So we're not asking anything that's not ordinary, it's already in this community. This is the last property of an SR 43 in this particular area. Your next one over, it's undeveloped, is like three parcels to the east, and after that, there's no SR 43 in this entire area. This is the end of city of Peoria at this point. We did put a request in for the side setback, and we'll address with staff after this meeting regarding that issue between the applicant's property and the SRP. So the goal of this was to, like I said, maximize as much as we can to use the property for the goals and wishes that the client would like to have on this property. And because of this cul-de-sac, it kind of limited what we can do and so forth. So that's what we're looking at. Those are the big things as far as we're seeing is just the setbacks. We're trying to mimic what they did with the property next to us to the east and also to the south. So I'm available for any questions.
Does the board have questions for Mr. Dixon?
Mr. Dixon, are there any unique, like, geographic features with that property that lead you to want to set the structure where you have it?
Well, yeah, we got some swells we got to deal with, and if we keep pushing the structure back, we're not going to be able to do the client won't be able to do what he wants to do with the structure. There's some swells off to the east right there between our property on the east side, and there's some to the south. That area south of that cul-de-sac is like a big drainage area for that entire community. So, yeah, we got to deal with some swells, and if we start losing property, he's going to start cutting back at what he would like to do to his property.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
At the time that the property was purchased, did they already have a design in mind, or did the design come after they purchased the land?
Design came in after they purchased the land.
Thank you.
Does staff have a rebuttal to the applicant's comments?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we appreciate the applicant's desire to maximize the full extent of development on the property. However, in the case of a variance request, it is to either provide equity for a condition, an environmental condition, which makes the lot pretty much undevelopable as is without some sort of a remedy. Or it is such that a literal interpretation does not provide the same equity as other homeowners for that residence or for a commercially zoned property. In this case, maximizing development on the property is not in itself justification for the request. The applicant would be able to make modifications to the design to have the home meet the front building setback. Would that yield in perhaps a reduction in the amount of accessory structures that may be desired? More than likely, yes. Or it could be a redesign of the layout to accommodate those in a different configuration. So trying to maximize the development on the lot in and of itself does not necessitate or does not meet the criteria of the variance request. And so therefore, as staff has stated, we believe the application does not meet all of the criteria required in order to grant that variance.
Do you have a response to that, Mr. Dixon?
If we're forced to push back this thing, he will have to modify what he would like to do for the design. Therefore, he can't use this property to the full extent that he would like to use this property. We will have to deal with some swells that are on the property, and that's going to limit what we can do. That 15 feet means a lot to my client, so he can use this property to what he would like to use this property for.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from the public to speak on this matter? Okay, well, now the board will discuss and probably make a motion. I think this is a creative use of a very difficult site. I think that the 5 criteria are really, it's a close call on every one of them. And I think you can make a case, and I think that the applicant has made a case for each one of the 5. And therefore, I would move that we grant the application, grant the variance. Do I have a second?
Can we maybe talk through each criteria to have some discussion on that? And I'm curious how you see it. Give me a second to ask you a specific question, because there's some that I had a different viewpoint on. I just want to hear your thought. So yeah, maybe the 3rd criteria, alleged hardship caused by literal interpretation.
Well, the applicant says the buildable area starts 60 feet from the property line because of the easement and the setback, and pushes the development back more into the truncated area of the lot, which is less area development. You've got a triangular lot. So really, I think what he's saying is to get a house there at all, you need to bring it a little more forward. And I don't see that it really hurts anything to bring it forward. You're there on a cul-de-sac. There's no neighbors complaining on the other side. They actually have side setbacks instead of front setbacks. And you got a power easement on the other side. So I think that the unique character of the lot makes a literal interpretation more than personal inconvenience or financial hardship. I think it's pretty creative site plan, and it works with minimal impact, and it's a unique piece that I don't see that that it confers a special privilege that's denied to anyone else.
I think the
Because one of a
problem I have is they knew the lot was that way, in that shape, before they bought it. And so you would know how far your house has got to be set back. So you're buying a property with the knowledge of, this is kind of how you have to build on it. And they haven't built anything yet, so changing the design of the house, is something, they can do. It's not built yet, they haven't actually built the home, so.
Can you go back to the slide that shows those setbacks and? Thank you. So my question is pushing the house, I guess, which would be north, more into the narrow part. What impact does that have?
Chair, is that a question for staff?
Who's the question for?
Probably to the architect, maybe?
Like I said, by pushing, we also got to do some swells on this property. And if you push the house back, that's going to give us less opportunity and less area to run the drainage we need to get through the property.
Can you clarify the swells you're referring to? So
There are 3 swells in this property. There is one currently swell is on the east side of that property, and there's 2 swells to the south of that property.
So you're saying that moving the house north to accommodate for the setbacks would create drainage issues?
Yes.
And the same with the pickleball court?
Pickleball court can be in the retention area. It could be underwater. In a storm event, those things can be set in the retention area because we have to retain this water on our property. So that could be set below. So if it does get a storm event, concrete, asphalt, it doesn't care if it's underwater.
Okay. So the real point here is the house.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that the fact that they haven't built anything shows that they're doing this the right way. And I think had they built something, came in for a variance then, that would just go to personal inconvenience and financial hardship like the last case. And so I support the variance. I guess my motion dies for lack of a second. Is there other discussion?
I have 2 questions. One question is the potential of having a side entrance such that, similar to the neighbors, they could have the front variance be on the east side. Is that not an option based on, the nature of the lot and just the available east to west space?
Chair, would that be a member for staff, that question, or would that be for the applicant?
I'm sorry, that would probably be for the applicant.
Would you please state your question again?
Yes, so previously, it had been mentioned that the adjacent property to the east, their proximity to that street to the south was less than what you're asking for, but that's because they have an access on the east side that means their front easement is on the east and their side easement is on the south.
That's correct.
Is that not an available option for you in this case to create an easement that?
No, to create an easement, you're giving away property to the city for a road at this point. So we'll be compounding the issue that's on the actual road to the south. Because usually a road easement usually runs about 15 feet. And so now we're losing 15 feet of property
Up the whole side.
off to the side.
All right.
Right. I also have a question. So those properties that are on the side of this house, I know you had mentioned that some of them are given the 20-foot setback. Do you know if the properties right next to them are given the 20-foot setback, or are they also the 40-foot setback?
Oh, the properties to the south, they're set back from the road at 20 feet. So our goal was to match the community there. So you got these row houses there to the south of us, that development, they're set back 20, 25 feet from the road. So by setting our house 20 feet from the road, 20, 25 feet from the road, we'll be matching what they're doing, it's already been built. So we're trying to, look like we're fitting into the community.
So that area, the Sierra Ridge Estates are all 20-foot setback, is what
Yeah,
you're
20,
saying?
25, yes.
Okay.
Chairman, may I make a clarification statement on that one? The subdivision to the south is a completely different zoning district. It is R118, and so there would be different development standards for that particular subdivision compared to the one in question.
I have another question. The zoning is, I believe, SR 43. Is it possible to rezone this lot? And what does that process look like?
Mr. Chair, Board Member Bao, I'm guessing that question was to staff. In terms of recommendations provided to the applicant, there is a number of design options they have available to reconfigure the property and perhaps come up with a slightly different configuration and still try to meet their design intent. The casita can be moved forward or attached to the structure. The three-car garage can be adjusted in a manner. You can move things around. We did not discern any notable drainage or engineering standard or any engineering conditions that could not be adjusted or mitigated on this particular property. Therefore, we were recommending design modifications to the layout. Rezoning is not something that we would normally recommend. That would be considered spot zoning because there's no adjacent area immediately around it unless it was completely touching. And if we were to pursue that, it would be out of character for the remaining larger subdivision, if you will. So we believe there are actual design modifications. It may be moving some accessory structures around and reconfiguring it or pushing the house back. Those are all options that are available to the applicant. It may not be the desired condition, but it's not something that warrants or meets the justification for the variance request in our mind.
So you're saying rezoning's not really an option? Just he could come up with a different plan?
Chair,
But he's
that
saying it won't work.
there may be a disagreement on that discussion point, but yes, we would not recommend because it would be spot zoning and not something that the city is looking to do. So again, working within the constraints of the site, we would recommend modifying the layout to try to meet as much as possible the desired items on the site, but perhaps in a different configuration, and staff would work with them as we identified on that side setback to try to make those things more palatable. In this current configuration, there is some aspects about the design from an engineering standpoint that cause concerns from the driveway location and the clipping. So even if this application was to be moving forward with an approval, we suspect that additional modifications would need to be made in order to meet site visibility concerns, in order to meet engineering concerns. So that's where we are recommending further analysis of this layout.
I think I'm confused on that. So you're saying even if the variance were granted, there's going to be additional problems with the site plan?
Chair, I'm going to ask Chris to forward it to this particular graphic. So from a driveway condition standpoint, having that island in the middle of both driveways causes a concern when you have a large vehicle with a turning movement. It is so close to the corner of the adjoining neighbor, so if you were to have a large vehicle with pulling a trailer or an RV that does not have, that has a larger turning movement, To make it into that driveway, you're either making a very wide swing, or if you cut it too short, you can potentially clip the rear property line because of the turning movements.
Couldn't they go to the cul-de-sac and do a U-turn and come in from the other direction?
So when, Chair, great question. When we look at it from a driveway condition, we're making sure from a site visibility standpoint, normally when you have a lot condition abutting kind of a rear yard, we would normally put what we call a chamfer in the wall, where it would open up the spacing, or the wall would be set back in order to increase the spacing that you can see turning into the driveway. So without making modifications to the driveway consideration, you're causing kind of abnormal turning movements. You would have to force the vehicle to swing wider, take a larger run at the cul-de-sac. The island in itself between those two driveways causes an engineering concern. So what they have recommended is, and requested, is those two driveways would be combined to give distance away from that wall. So there's a reduced potential to clip the neighbor's wall from a turning movement standpoint. When you do that, the resulting driveway, to make that to make a combined driveway turning movement and the proximity to where that garage would be, it's still a difficult entry point to swing around into the RV gate. So this configuration causes concern as it is from a traffic site visibility standpoint and from an engineering. So we would need to work through what that would look like. One recommendation is to merge those driveways together to provide that spacing between this lot and the adjoining lot.
Are there other properties accessing their driveways from this cul-de-sac?
No. Mr. Chair, no, there would be no additional properties. So one other consideration that we have seen is when cul-de-sacs do occur in these locations, guest parking for other residents may occur, and sometimes people will park in cul-de-sacs that may not be residents. So when we're looking at it from a safety consideration, we do have to take into account that full maneuverability within that cul-de-sac may not be possible. And so we're looking for a very safe, clean turning movement into the driveway configurations.
Is parking allowed on the street there?
Mr. Chair, that would be correct, yes.
It is allowed?
It would be allowed, yes.
So what would be involved in making that a no parking area?
Chairman, members of the board, that requires a significant resident agreement for that to occur. That traditionally does not happen. And once no parking signs are installed, everyone, no exclusions, could not park in that area.
Any further discussion or questions from the board?
I have a question. So they didn't present these engineering problems to the zoning commission when they presented all of this? They didn't present the drainage issue to you guys?
Chair, board member, from a development standpoint, when our engineering department looked at the application, they noted no unique or differing conditions on this site that would make it unique to other lots that have similar conditions. So this would not qualify under a drainage or a wash consideration. Because of the layout and the setback and the type of lot size, there is some concern that we would have, that would be a criteria. And so we're resolving a side yard encroachment through the allowance of the zoning ordinance from a planning manager adjustment. So the side yard is taken care of, which is where the true impact of this odd configured lot occurs.
So I'm going to renew my motion to approve the application and allow the variance. Do I have a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
I would like to make a motion to deny the variance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's go to a vote. The motion carries. The application is denied. Are there any requests from the public to comment on non-agenda items? Any other speaker request forms? There are none. Is there any other reports from the staff?
Chair, members of the board, we do have an item that it will be coming before you during the May meeting, so we would invite you back for May 9th. We will have one item before you. That will be a regular meeting, council chambers, same start time. So we'll let you, hopefully you can make it, and we'll query you closer to time on that one. That's all that staff has.
So it'd be 5:30, council chambers, May 9th.
Yes, sir, same bat time, same bat channel.
Anything further? Okay, we're adjourned.